Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Brown Power Analysis. Today I have on
Christine Clifton.
welcome, Christine. Welcome to the podcast. I'd love to get to know a little bit more about you, and then we'll dive into our main topic for the day, soft selling. So why don't you start off by talking a little bit more about yourself, your story?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think this story is an interesting one, even though I'm a little biased, it's mine. But I did spend 20 years in a corporate management role before I became an entrepreneur. And I started my entrepreneurship as a coach for people with chronic illness. I myself deal with chronic illness. I have a genetic connective tissue disorder called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So I am very attuned to the health and wellness of my body and physical wellness. And when I stepped into my practice, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I figured I could do this thing. How hard could it be? And a couple years into it, I realized that I just wasn't getting the traction that I wanted. And I entered this $10,000 group coaching program for business coaching and was learning all this stuff and implementing everything that they were telling me to do. And it just wasn't working for me. And at the end of a year, it was $10,000 out of my pocket, and I was close to broke and pretty much burnt out. Totally despondent about how this had gone because I'd really hung my hat on this thing working for me. And I just couldn't figure out why it wasn't. So I had to do some real deep reflection. Am I going to go back to corporate, or am I going to continue this thing in terms of starting my own business? And I said, you know what? I can do it. Let me really think about the things that have landed and what was the secret sauce to those. And so I took a real objective approach to looking at myself, what had worked, who I am as a person, and started developing an approach with people that really fit me well, much better than I realized that the program hadn't actually fit me. So as I started implementing what I was recognizing as a system, I was having people come up to me in my small business community going, Christine, how are you doing all of this? Like, we see you everywhere, and you have so much energy. So it's not like you're doing too much. Like, what are you doing? We want to know. And I started teaching in small groups, small business owners, how to do what I was doing. And what I found was that people who started small business were super great at what they did, but they weren't super great at the business side, or more importantly, the sales side. They could sell widgets better than they can sell themselves. And that's a very common thing. It's very personal. So as I worked with these smaller groups, I refined my body of work, and I started calling it the softer side of selling because it really appealed to people who are what I call highly relational. And my definition of that is people who value relationships more than the final sale. You're not going to have a sales conversation and push, push, push until the person won't even pick up your phone call, right? And this method that we'll talk about a little later includes a lot of different approaches, but also systems that can feel very comfortable for someone who's highly relational, but also be effective. And so my career kind of evolved in the entrepreneur space, where I was doing this marketing piece, but then I started consulting small business owners with selling. And then as I was consulting with them with selling, and they weren't doing some of the things I was telling them they needed to do, even in the highly relational format, I realized that there's something even deeper that was stopping them. And I started digging into what I call the BS, or the belief systems, that was stopping them from doing what they needed to do. And it added a whole nother layer and a deeper layer to my work, because I could now see the theme and what was stopping them. And it was almost like, defragging the software that was getting in the way, and address that so that whatever they do from that point on wouldn't get in the way anymore. And that's pretty much where I am now, where I harmonize the kind of what I call inner work or the being of the person with the outer work or the doing of the person. And I work with entrepreneurs in business development, as I said, but I also work with career changers. And the concepts are the same. They have to self-promote, right? And career changers who want to change fields, they have a bit of an obstacle, at least they perceive it, because if they want to switch from, I'm going to be silly here, being an astronaut to being an underwater basket weaver, like somehow they've got to position themselves as the best underwater basket weaver ever. And so when they come into me, it's the same thing. It's a mindset thing because I need to eliminate their the stories they've told themselves about the immediate limitations that they see without even having tried it, but then also get them to see who they are today, what fits them, and then how we will go about, helping them self-promote. So that's it in a nutshell.
Interesting. One thing that I really picked up there towards the beginning of the conversation was you talked a lot about, you were a marketing, you were in consulting, and you kind of made this shift to your brand, yourself, your personality, and in a way, it seems like soft selling is a brand, an emotional brand way for certain types of personal brands to sell based off of just who they are as people. So, can you explain to me a little bit about how you went through that transition and that mindset shift, and then we can kind of get a little bit into soft selling altogether?
Sure. Well, like I said, I had tried the things that other people told me I should try. And it's things like, 50 cold calls a day and, following up until somebody says no. And one thing they even taught us, it makes me cringe even saying this, they taught us how to move someone through a sales conversation, coaching them how to sell their belongings in order to afford my coaching. Right? Like that makes me vomit a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know,
yeah.
and so, but at the time I was naive about things and I'm like, really? Is this the thing to do? So when I had no success, and started thinking what would fit me better, I started also thinking about how would I like to be sold to? Like, what do I want as an individual? And I started thinking that I want engagement. I want someone who really is interested in what makes me tick and what I'm really about and what I really need. And so I just kind of flipped that and I said, if I'm working with other highly relational people, then it's likely they're going to want something similar. And what highly relational people do, how do you know who a highly relational person is? You get them on the phone, and the first thing they say is, "How are you? How are you doing? Did you have a vacation yet this summer? Like, how's the family?" And it's one little clue that you can pick up on. And so, like attracts like, if your
Hmm.
listeners believe in law of attraction or power of positive thinking. So as a highly relational person myself, I was attracting highly relational people into my life. And so it became this real science experiment as I was working with people to learn how to sit down and really talk to them when I would initially meet them in networking, and then finding out their pains and what they were really facing and what the root cause of the issue was. So for example, I could say all day that I could help you make more money and get more clients,
Yes.
but my particular audience or ideal client, they are nervous when they go networking or they stand up to give their elevator pitch and their mind goes blank, right? Or they go to sell in a sales conversation and they don't want to close it. Like it feels icky to them to close it right there. And that's the real pain that's behind them wanting to grow their business and help more people. And I began to see that. And I knew ways to do that because I'm a highly relational person. Now, in corporate, I was in human resources for 11 years, and I happened to have been an internal sales coach to the commercial division of my company for 2 years. And so I had exposure to commercial industrial sales, as I would call it. Not sexy. We sold plastic, acrylic plastic, but the concepts are the same, right? And so I brought those concepts in, but again, modified them so that I could begin to cater to different styles of people. And I used the DISC assessment. I don't know if you're familiar with DISC. It's a behavioral style assessment. And so I was beginning to see the people that I was working with as being the I call the I style an interactor and the S style a supporter. I've turned them into avatar names because I think it's easier for people to picture what the styles are instead of the technical names. And they are both on the relational side of the DISC matrix. So, it was almost like I was my own behavioral scientist as I was out there. And it was just a morphing. It was like slapping a piece of clay on a wheel to form pottery and just start molding it as I started talking with and finding out the pains, but also then seeing what worked for me. Now, the other aspect in my case is that I mentioned before I have a chronic illness. So I have stamina challenges sometimes, and going in big groups of people like networking can drain me really easily. And I also tend to be a little on the introverted side. I'm really an ambivert, but I'm a little on the introvert side. And I want to make any interaction I have, I want to maximize it, right? So I want to get as great a result from the least amount of effort as I possibly can in my business development. And I want to do it in a way that isn't icky, like those people at the networking event that deal out their business card like a poker hand, like and then they're off to the next group. Like, I don't want to be that way. So that's, the how I started formulating it. And I am Virgo. So if anybody follows zodiac signs, we're known for our planning and organization. So I also had this knack of being able to put and see the themes of putting things into systems and putting it, I call it a business development ecosystem. And so to put it in a system so that it kind of runs automatically for the individual and they don't have to focus on that as much, right? And there's a big feast or famine that happens, especially with service business owners, because they put their head down to do all the work and then they come up and have no leads in the pipeline and they've got to go out networking in business development.
Mhm.
And then they get more clients and they put their heads down and the vicious cycle continues. So the ecosystem is one way to keep the activity going so that the leads and opportunities and prospects can keep coming in. So that's how I developed it.
How did you so a little bit about it. You talk a lot about referrals in the system, focusing on referrals. Now, do these referrals have to be do they have to be warmer? Like, are you going to events? Are you going to trade shows? Or is it more so like, is there opportunity for this system to work for, like you said, online companies, people that have to do digital marketing, for instance, or go on podcasts, and how would that somewhat work for someone that has an audience that's more online?
That's a great question. When I started out, as I mentioned, I was circling in my local business community. One of my businesses after my coaching practice was a wellness studio, right? So I was brick and
Mhm.
mortar. So I put feet on the street in the town I was in and I started going out and meeting everybody. And so it's definitely a different environment than online. And actually, it's almost like two completely different planets,
Yeah.
but the concepts still apply. And what I see similar to what I'm talking about in person. So most of my clients tend to be service entrepreneurs. So they're selling a service or selling what they're actually doing. But what I'm seeing online that is very similar, like, think about how popular quizzes have become in lead development in digital marketing. Like everyone on Facebook, like, what kind of popcorn am I? They're going to take a quiz. And what I'm seeing in digital marketing is, quizzes are really great lead funnels these days. So it helps qualify the person through the quiz. And then on the other side of the quiz is hopefully, usually, some personal experience of the person, who they might, be selling the product. So there's a video or a teleclass or something like that where they can then experience the person. So those are ways to kind of lead them in, and instead of just here's the landing page, buy my stuff, it's what I call bridge building. So if I build a variety of bridges that I invite people across them, then the power goes in the shoes of the decider, not me. Like, the burden of responsibility is not on me. It's on them to decide when and if they walk across one of those bridges. And the bridges I'm going to build are the ones that I want to play in. They're activities I want to be doing. So similarly, online, it might be, this, of course, classic: land on a website. There's a irresistible free offer. People opt into the newsletter to get the irresistible free offer. Then on the newsletter, they'll be getting a drip campaign to get to know the person. And hopefully there's some PSs in the drip campaign that link through to a video on YouTube. So these are all ways that can incorporate these relational methods of selling, instead of it just being like, I remember getting a drip campaign where I was getting multiple emails a day. It was like 21 emails in 7 days or something crazy like that. So when I did my drip email, I'm like, I'm not going to do that to people. People got an email every 3 or 4 days for a month. And if they weren't going to convert by then, in my opinion, they're not going to convert, right? So, and they're still on my newsletter. So at least they're going to get my newsletter once a month. So that's a great question. I see it working in digital today, and you can make it highly relational if you want to. And there's a lot of mediums that can allow you to do that.
Now, do you feel like this is mainly for, well, let's just say, personal brands, somebody starting up, someone that's working for themselves, like you said, or with this, you called it the business, the ecosystem, right? How is that ecosystem? Can you translate that to, a team? Like, let's say a more of a corporate or a consumer brand that's maybe transitioned from the personal brand. Does it work well with those types of brands as well?
I believe it does. I think the nuance to it is that, just like I said, what kind of person am I? And I built the system to match me. For dealing with a team, we want to leverage each individual member of the team and who they naturally are. So I think there might be some tweaks about how this would go. The system still works. What I call the ecosystem is what we've all heard: people have to know, like, and trust you in order to buy from you. Like, that's a standard thing. Well, my ecosystem is taking the know, like, trust and turning it into an activity system. So, for example, if I'm going to speak as a marketing channel, people are going to get to know me by speaking. But instead of just speaking willy-nilly, I need to think about, how do I get them to like me? Right?
Mhm.
So I'm going to then go speak and say, okay, I already know that I'm going to bridge them to something that's going to help them like me. And that might be, I don't know, my own event that I might be wanting to promote, or a class that I'm giving. So when I speak, I'm going to then invite people over to the class or the event. And then when I'm in the class or the event, I need to have thought about how I'm going to make them trust me, right? So whether that's doing a one-on-one client experience with me, or whether that's a group coaching program or something like that. But by thinking about it as an ecosystem, I call it spastic marketing. It keeps people from doing spastic marketing, like twitching and doing this and twitching and doing that. Instead, we're going to start linking probably what they're already doing and moving it into this systemic way that they're already deciding ahead of time how they want to experience people and how they want to bring them through their practice. So to do that then with each individual members of a team, to your question, that might be where things get, personalized. So let's think about, I don't know, a law firm. So law firms look at attorneys as being lead developers for their practice. And so they're going out networking. And networking is a very common KNOW, step of the know, like, trust system. So what happens is attorneys will go out networking, they hand out their card, but that's it. They haven't brought them into the like category. So a smart law firm would have, I'm just going to make something up, like a monthly topical class that maybe the attorneys rotate each month giving. And then every time the attorneys are networking, they already know that they're going to invite whomever to that class. Like it's an established thing. So one of my sayings is always have something to invite people to. Always, like whatever it is, whether it's a recorded something on your YouTube channel or whether it's live, because that's going to bridge people into that. Again, invite them across the bridge. And then once that law firm or those attorneys get people into the class or the educational seminar, they would then think about, how do I bridge them into the trust category? And the trust category isn't just becoming a client of ours. It's, do you know me well enough and now think of me highly enough that you would refer to me? Or connect me to a joint venture partner or a strategic alliance partner. So it isn't just like how, would you become my client? It is how well are they engaged with me to really say, okay, this person knows what they're talking about and I want them a part of my community. So that's how I would tweak it. And yes, each member of the team needs to think about the know, like, trust that would probably fit them best, but then they can be supported by the firm by having those established events that can make it easier for that business development to happen.
That's beautiful. So because of who our audience is, do you think the same thing would work for, let's say, a yoga studio or a gym where they have multiple trainers with different personalities that have to go out there and be unique about who they are? Do you think that would work really well for those type of service-based businesses?
I think so. Are they typically employed by the location or are they contract?
Yes, yes,
They're
yes.
employed. Yeah. So that's a little different if they're a contract, but it's, what I look at this as, I look at, okay, what is my micro message and what's my macro message? So if I have team members as a part of my business, I want to give them sound bites. Audible, I call it audible branding. Okay. So I want to give them sound bites that are consistent, but also ones that will relay their individuality. So the macro message of the business should be the consistent one, right? It might be the tagline of the fitness studio or yoga studio. Um, uh, I remember one tagline was yoga for the people or something like that was their tagline. And one of my clients owned a wellness studio, and we came up with healthy people, thriving communities as their overarching brand tagline. So the macro message helps each team member represent the company as a whole, and you're consistent. Then the micro message comes down to, okay, who am I as an individual trainer or teacher? And how do I want to relay my personality? So I'm a very earthy, kind of warm person. And somebody else might be a little more short and to the point person. Now I'm going a little bit back to the disc, and I think disc is really valuable for self-awareness. And it's okay to be disc on your delivery, but you also need to understand that your potential client might be a different style than you. So when you micro message, you want to be sure that you have a rational and a relational benefit. I call it decision-making motivator that you can articulate, because the rational benefit is going to appeal to the directors and the contemplators of DISC, which are the people who are task related and rationally focused. And you want to have a relational benefit because that's going to bring the interactors and the supporters in. So with, falling short of us being fortune tellers and being able to know exactly what style people are, we can just simply say, hey, in my micro message, I want to be sure that I'm going to help more people, which is kind of the relational benefit, and make more money. Okay, a rational benefit. So when we can come up with those two benefits and make them our own, again, our own languaging, then your micro message is going to be even more compelling because you know you're going to land one of those with the person that you're talking with. And so regardless of what style you are. So that's another way to engage and use people who are on a team, like trainers and teachers. Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I feel like that's you know, we're very big on helping personal brands transition to consumer brands, and consumer brands transitioning to what we call community brands. And what a lot of what you say there with the soft selling shows you how important it is to kind of go deep. And that's why I asked you at the beginning about personal, you going through your shift, because figuring out your values and what you even want to bring in, I think is a very important step that you would probably need to take or have established. And if you're a consumer brand, very similar concept. Maybe if you had your whole team aligned with the brand values of the company, you're bringing in those types of employees, that your system would help so much more, because it would bring in you'd be able to define that audience and who you want to talk to a lot more.
Exactly, exactly. And when I had my wellness studio, one of my commitments was accessibility. So, because I had been dealing with chronic illness, at the time I was only diagnosed with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And later in life, I realized it was because of this genetic connective tissue disorder. So my value was accessibility. So every Monday evening, I had a free class for the community. And when I had cooperative instructors in my space, and their part of their contract was to deliver one class every so often, so that I could fill my Monday spots. And it was a win-win-win, because the instructor could get exposure to the public, the studio could get exposure to the public, and then the public could learn about all these natural health modalities, which I was, why I opened the wellness studio. I'm like, everyone should know about these things that I'm learning about, because I'm feeling so much better with what I'm facing. And so that becomes the KNOW step of the development. Like, free classes are going to get people in the studio. Then you have a little table on the side, and it's a register to win a free yoga class or something like that. You're collecting contact information on your table on the side. And then you can start, bridging people from the free class, into the paid classes into the studio. So that type of system it's a great way, because it's able to satisfy those three things, like the win-win-win. That, like I said, it was fulfilling for me, because I was able to honor the importance to me of accessibility. It was free for the public. Oh, here's another side note: the local newspapers publish free things all the time in the community calendar, right? So they don't publish paid things, so it was another way to get out and reach the public. And then again, the instructor got exposure, and then the public got more education. So it's a beautiful system. Of course, I'm biased. It is my body of work, but to me, it is more freeing for the individual or the business, because it's not like you're saying, I've got to get people in the door. It instead of it being this, like, I don't know, assertive, like, I've got to do this thing energy. It's more of I get to stand strongly in my brand, be clear about who I help and how, and then invite people in. And then so to me, energetically, that's just so much stronger. And I find that it also brings in more long-standing clientele, whatever
Mhm.
your business is, as well. Another real quick story: I was working with a fractional CFO. She had left being a CFO for small businesses and started a firm, just herself. And when she started with me, we I said, what's the biggest pain of business owners? And she's like, oh, they're always challenged with cash flow. They just don't pay attention to cash flow. I'm like, all right, that's our message. We're going to start, creating this message with cash flow. And about 3, 4, 5 months in, we're realizing we're bringing in business owners who are in dire need of like a major restructuring of their business. Like they're in bad shape, okay, financially. And so she and I were like, okay, this ain't working. We've got to repivot. And so we changed her tagline to developing pathways to profitability for growing local business. And that was her tagline. And so we changed it to profitability. And that's when the tide started changing for her. And she started getting those clients who were more stable with their finances, who were looking to start maximizing profitability. And I worked with her for about 6 years, maybe 7. And we took her from a solopreneur to almost $1 million in sales in that period of time and 5 employees. So, it's not flash in the pan growth, but it's still pretty stellar growth for an individual business to grow like that in just about 6 years. And it was because we used this system for her. And in her case, she was petrified networking when she first came to me. She's very left-brained, right? She's a financial person. So I taught her how to network, taught her how to convert from networking into the no category into the like category, and then from the like category into the trust category. And she started getting so good at networking that we started hosting her own VIP networking events. And so it was invitation only. Right. So she got to the point where she was now handpicking who she wanted to network with. And it was like this exclusive thing that people were like, Cheryl invited me into, to her networking event, so it became this big thing.
That's cool.
And that's how she got a lot of referral partners from it, strategic alliances, and she became known as like the networking queen in her area. So it's wonderful to see how people can grow, and we get past. Remember, we were talking about that inner work and those fears and those limiting beliefs, and so we were able to move her past those and really get her into a real growth mode so that she could open that bandwidth and get to the space that she wanted to in her business.
That's beautiful. Is there any way that you can explain a little bit about, I know you explained how soft selling, works in a nutshell, but can you explain maybe a little bit more of kind of the steps that someone would want to take if they were to end up just dabbling a little bit on their own, if they could take a nugget out of today's podcast?
Sure. Here's the thing. I believe people are probably running around. They're so busy already. So when I meet somebody, the first thing I want to say is, what are you already doing? Right. And then I ask them, what are you already doing that you really want to do and that you like to do? So we can narrow down those activities. And so within those activities, I look to see if I can assemble the ecosystem, the know, like, trust ecosystem with what they're already doing. And really, 7 times out of 10, they've already got a piece of each of those. They just haven't thought about linking them together for themselves. So that's the first approach I would take. And think about the no step as being because that's going to be where you're going to probably output the most energy. So it's, if you look at it, I don't like looking at sales as a funnel. Again, I like looking at it as an ecosystem, because if you're inviting people in who are a match to your messaging and they match the psychographic of who you want to be working with, I want to keep my arms around those people, right? Those people are the ones who, if I can grow them in my garden, of this ecosystem, that they are going to either come back to me again in the future. They're going to be the ones who refer. They're going to, fill in the blank. They're going to be my people. So when you choose that right like category, you really want it to be something that's going to keep your energy up, that you're going to be willing to do and really want to be doing. So really think about that. I had one client who she's like, networking, absolutely not. She's like, but I love teaching classes. So in her case, her no step was a class. Where in my prior example, the class was the like step. So we really want to personalize it to that person. So that's the question you would ask yourself, and think about how you want to initially meet people. And then the conversion of that is to really have, again, that micro message that you want to bridge people from that no step into the like step. So you really want to have that compelling message where you're saying, hey, come on. I call it the pool. Like invite them into this place where you're going to pool them and they can play with you. So it might even be electronic. You might have a LinkedIn group that you have an electronic or digital networking group like on LinkedIn, or you might be really active on Insta and you want to invite people to your Insta, page. So really think about how you're going to invite people over to that. And again, once you pool them, that's when you start deciding how you're going to bridge them to the next step. And you want to be able to provide value for them. Mm-hmm. I had a networking call earlier with someone who could be a potential client of mine in the future, but it was just a networking chat. And what I did was gave him a couple of tips for his new business. Is about 2 years in his service business. And one of them just blew the top off of it. He's like, oh my gosh, that's exactly, in line with how I want to do business. And I'm like, well, that's why I suggested it. Like, it's going to be aligned with your energy. So for me, that networking conversation was, I'm going to give value and not just ask them to go to the next step. So that's the middle step being the like step. I want to pool people there in different places so I can play with them, give them value in different ways, and develop that relationship so they can eventually move on then to the trust factor. So again, whether that's in person, online, something in between, think about the thing again where you're going to want to show up, because that's the important thing. Like if you're going to start a Facebook group and hate Facebook, it just ain't going to happen for you.
Yeah.
So that's the important thing. And so again, when you think about your trust step, you want to think about what you want in your business. So if you are looking for clients, there's going to be a micro message for that. If you're looking for a strategic alliance or a joint venture, then you can ask that pool, right? That those people who are playing together in your like step, ask them for the connections to this type of strategic alliance or joint ventures that you're looking for. So this middle group is going to be the provider for you, for whatever grows from there. And again, they're likely the people who might come around, and even if they spent money with you before, will likely spend money with you again eventually. And I've had that happen. I structure my services and my business in what I call Legos. They're short little bursts of time with me so that they can, if we develop something that they've got to go totally revamp their website, they're not going to be dumping, thousands of dollars with me and then feel like, oh God, I don't have money for my website. So that's how I like to do it. So then they go do their website and then they come back to me. So that's how I build my trust step, so that, because I know that that's the condition that a lot of solo service entrepreneurs are in, that they get, cash every month, let's say, but they can't do a big outlaying of doing everything at once. So I want to be flexible with them. So structure what I call your pricing, packaging, your programs in a way that also meet the need of the people that you're serving. So it's all interconnected. And so that's the steps that I would take people through, obviously the higher level, because I would need to be specific with a specific person, but that at least helps people understand how to build. And you might have more than one ecosystem, obviously, online, offline, in person. So you really want to think about what, again, you're going to sustain, and you want to diversify, just like your financial portfolio. And a lot of it is experimentation. So to my point earlier with the CFO, our first message didn't work. We were getting the wrong people in. So you need to be agile enough to be ready to shift and move. But when you have the structure in place, or what I call the infrastructure, then it's easy to pivot and move because you've already been doing the system, like the ecosystem. You're just changing your message, right? So everything else is now habit, and you've got people coming in. So
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. At the end of the day, I think that soft selling and the way you're talking about the approach and how it should work is how sales should be perceived. And there's so many people out there, that still think, and I said this to my wife. I say this to my wife all the time. I'm like, everyone in the world at one point, not everyone, but 90% of the population has went in and dealt with buying a new car or a used car. And so everyone just perceives this selling in the spectrum of, like you said, just spray the wall, reach as many people as possible until someone says no. And there's no real community building. There's no real relationship building anymore. And it's all become so transactional because of online that people have lost their spectrum of wanting to just build relationships. And that's what we're all here for. That's how everyone grows, right? And so it's funny you say that, because I'm a very big component on with our message and our movement, which is, everyone should think of themselves as a community brand, not a personal brand, not a corporate brand, not a consumer brand, but we're a community. Everyone should be aligned with each other. And so I think everything you're saying is spot on. I mean, even to the point where I hint may bring you on to help me out a little bit.
Well, all right then. But real quickly on that though, it's really joyful, and not everyone cares about relationships like you and I do. I'll put that qualifier in there. But I agree with you. I think that one of the things I say is technology has pushed us behind screens of all sizes, and it's literally caused our conversation muscles to atrophy. So we've kind of forgotten how to connect. Young people aren't learning how. So if we're going to keep this human connection alive, it is up to us. And I think Simon Sinek said this in his book, Start With Why, that people will rally behind you when you're trying to better yourself more than they'll rally behind you when you're competing against someone else. So that example I mentioned earlier, where when you're asking for connections or for help, they're going to be with you because they want you to succeed. And so you talk about community brand. That's the joy of community branding. When I published my last book, I did a crowdfunding, and within, 10 days, my book was fully funded. Everyone's like, yes, we want to hear from you, Christine. Yes, we want to hear from you. And it really was, I didn't need the money. It was really a social experiment, actually, that I added a chapter in the book to talk about. But it was just beautiful. Everyone dove in, like a neighbor contributed, my dad contributed. Like, it was just a beautiful thing to see. So what you're doing in terms of community branding, I believe that's the key, is because when you're in community, when you want to support each other, you want each other to succeed and you want to help each other. So yeah, talk about beautiful. I love it. Love what you're doing.
I don't even think it matters if you're, an online business who has to sell 1 million widgets, like you said, or you're, a local service business that has to, bring in 20 to 30, people a month or something like that. Like you said, your lawyer or your financial person, she was able to, find something that aligned with her, and that strategy on eventually opening up her own VIP day. And you're right, and that's down to the brand awareness. And I feel like brand awareness gets lost, and that the trust people get lost with. You're just trying to build trust with people, and just aligning those points. And so everything you said is beautiful. I really appreciate you being on. why don't you tell everyone again who you are, where they can find you, and where they can get a little bit more info on the soft selling. I think everyone that listens to this may want to reach out to you on your preferred channel of choice.
Absolutely. Well, the best place to go, my hub, is my website, which is my name, ChristineClifton.com. And that's ChristineClifton.com. And everything is a hub there. You'll see a page that's free, and there's a ton of free resources there. You'll see a link to my YouTube channel, and there's a lot of things about soft selling there on my YouTube channel, classes that I've taught. So you get a lot of information there. On the free page of my website, there is something called the Your Spirit at Work guidebook, and it's talking about the micro messaging. So if your ears perked up today when you heard that term micro messaging, that guidebook, it's a digital guidebook, can help you through creating some micro messages for yourself. So again, accessibility is still one of my values, and that's why I have all those free things on my website. I'm on LinkedIn as well, but again, go to my website. All the links through to everything I'm doing is right there.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, again, I want to appreciate you being on Brand Power Analysis, and this won't be the last time we'll be talking. That's for sure.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being on.
You're welcome.